There's a fly on the record. If you hear a buzzing noise, that's who it is. I tried to get him to go outside, but he wasn't having it, so we're just gonna have to leave him. Hi guys! I am here today basically for catch up. Let's catch up. I just feel like there's a bunch of things in my personal life that might be nice to update you all about. So I asked on Instagram and Twitter what you would want me to sort of address in this video, and there were 3 main things that came up. 3 things that I kind of anticipated, 2 in particular. I knew that that is what people would want updated about, and then a 3rd topic plus a few other random questions. So I'm kind of just gonna like chat about those topics that people asked questions about, and maybe some other bits and pieces. But with that being said, this is going to be a pretty casual, chatty video. I've got my iced coffee, which is decaf because I've already had 2 caffeinated regular coffees this morning, and although I love drinking coffee and the taste of coffee, you know, there's like a limit to my caffeine intake in the space of a few hours. I also got this plastic cup in a Fairy Loot subscription box, and it's like one of my favourite things of the past few months. It's made me so happy to like have my giant like buckets of iced coffee in. That was not what this video was about though, but yeah, I said it was going to be casual and chit-chatty, so there we go. We've opened with the important topic of iced coffee vessels. Moving on to the first of the 3 topics I think I would like to address in this video, and that is my move to Edinburgh. So I briefly mentioned in some other videos, a video online somewhere, that I am moving back to Edinburgh. All of my stuff is being transported to Edinburgh. So there was loads of questions about like, am I moving back to Edinburgh permanently? How do I feel about moving back to Edinburgh? Why am I moving back to Edinburgh? How am I getting along living with my mum again? And all of that fun stuff. Somebody also asked me how I'm getting on living with my parents, and like, please, if that was you, don't don't like feel bad about asking that. But just to clarify, my dad did pass away 3 years ago, so it's just me and my mum, for those of you that might not have been here for that and not know that. So I'm in Edinburgh, that's where I am right now, sitting on the floor in the sitting room, and I am not moving back to Edinburgh permanently. I am moving back to Edinburgh for a few months, basically. I mean, I've already been in Edinburgh since the beginning of lockdown. I've been in Edinburgh since about a week before lockdown. For various reasons, I came up here. I lived in a small flat with a flatmate who is a very good friend of mine, but you know, we didn't have outdoor spaces. Lockdown was pretty inevitable at that point, and my mum was by herself up here in Edinburgh, a little bit scared of being by herself, and also with an operation on the books. She like had an operation that was already scheduled before lockdown started, and she needed to have someone with her for that. So I initially planned on coming up for a week anyway for all of that stuff, but we just decided that with lockdown sort of on the horizon, I would come up here and stay with her. I would have a lot more space in this house than I would in my flat, and I'd be able to like keep her company, and also like she keeps me company. I'm like pretty close to my mum, so that's been pretty alright, and that has now gone on for months. And when I came here, let me tell you, I did not think it would be to move here. I did not think when I came up on the train that I booked the day before that I would not be going back to my flat in London, which is the case. I am never seeing my flat ever again, which is a little bit surreal because I lived in that flat for 3.5 years. I don't want to say I lived in London because I am going back. Like, this is not the end of my living in London, but my last period of living in London was like 3.5 years, and I spent like 3 years and 3 months of that in the same flat. When I moved to London, I stayed with my mum's friend. I like slept in her attic for a couple of months while I looked for a flat, and then my friend and I moved into this flat and then just stayed there for more than 3 years, and we really liked that flat. It was in Islington. I don't think I've ever mentioned before where it was. It was in North Islington. It was in Jeremy Corbyn's constituency, and it was everything I could have hoped and dreamed for. But I mean, I think like a lot of people, I'm kind of reassessing the situation right now. I'm reassessing work and money. Things are a little bit like up in the air. Things are a little bit unpredictable. I was in Edinburgh anyway and didn't have any plans to go back to my flat in the immediate future because For one, again, it would just be a matter of being cooped up in a small flat, not having access to a lot of the things that I would usually have access to. My university's closed, I can't see most of my friends. I could obviously now at this point go for sort of like little social distance walks and things with friends, but even in that case, some of my friends live on completely other sides of London, some of them are shielding, and it wouldn't be the London that I'm used to, and I essentially have the luxury of coming here. Like, I understand how fortunate I am to be able to be in Edinburgh in a house with a garden and space throughout this whole thing, although I've not seen any of my friends and I do miss them. But I couldn't afford to just keep paying rent indefinitely whilst I wasn't even living there. I'm not even sure I could have moved back and afford to pay rent, but for now I just couldn't really like justify the cost, and I wanted some time to just kind of be able to sort of assess my finances, if that makes sense, and just like maybe save some money. It obviously depends on how much I earn in these months, whether I'll be able to save or not. In lots of respects, again, I am so fortunate because I make some of my money off of YouTube and I've still been able to do that. I am very grateful to have the support of some of you on Patreon, and all of those things are incredible because they help me pay my bills, they help me pay for things that aren't even related to my flat but that are necessary expenditures, as well as, you know, buy some books and be able to make content and etc. However, in other respects I have lost work. My university, where I'm doing my PhD and I often get teaching work at, is currently practicing a hiring freeze and are also making staff redundant. So like there is no teaching work for me on the horizon. I will not be like rocking up to Roehampton in the next term to teach. That would seem very, very unlikely given the current circumstances. I've lost sort of writing commissions that I was doing because fair enough, those companies are having to prioritise what they spend their money on, and freelancers are often the first to go if they're not necessary staff, and that is what I am. I also haven't had the opportunity to do a lot of the sort of like summer book festival like work I often do, and just like other bits and pieces that haven't been happening. In that respect, obviously I have still had work. I have had some sponsorships and other little bits and pieces, and I'm so grateful for that, but it's a little bit unstable, if that makes sense. I'm sure a lot of you understand. It's just a very unstable situation to be in, and I just wasn't living in London technically anyway, and I wasn't able to do the things that I love about London, which is my friends and being able to walk around the streets and go to art galleries and spend time at my university and access the libraries, and I can't do any of that. So it just seemed like, why am I paying rent which I don't even know if I can afford in the long term, when I could just sort of come back here for a few months and think about things, which is kind of where I'm at. It's not like a long grand plan, but I am still a student in London. I am a PhD student at the University of Roehampton. I'm going to talk more about my PhD in general because a lot of people ask for updates on that topic, but I am a PhD student in Roehampton University. I'm not transferring universities. I know somebody asked that, but it's not really like PhDs don't work like that. I mean, you can transfer if you want, if that's feasible, but in terms of doing a PhD, it's not like I have a lot of face-to-face class time or anything like that. I don't need that much access to the actual university to be able to do my work. The only problem is I don't have access to any of the libraries I would usually go to, but that's the same for everybody, and it wouldn't be different whether I was in London or Edinburgh because I don't know when those things are going to open again. So basically anybody in academia right now will know that they're just kind of making do with what they can, and we're all sort of in the same boat there. In fact, it's a lot worse, I imagine, if you're sort of in a science-based subject where you need lab time, etc. But in terms of humanities researchers, we're kind of all in the same boat. So we're just making do with what we can have access to online, and support one another and share with one another what resources we have. I also have the luxury of living in the 21st century and owning a laptop, so I can Zoom and Skype and video call with my supervisors. So in that respect, very, very, very lucky. And that has been what I have been doing over the past few months. But I also did the first 6 months of my PhD remotely. I did, in fact, like, I think my PhD has just been like all over the place in terms of where I've been, because I spent the first 6 months of my PhD doing it remotely. I then moved to London, and then my dad was terminally ill with cancer, and I moved back here for around 5 or 6 months to care for him, and I was doing my PhD remotely then. So in a sense, this isn't that unusual to me, not being in the same city as my PhD university. So I have kind of done that before, and that's kind of what I'm still doing now. I have about 1.5 years left that will bring me to the 6-year mark, and I'm a part-time PhD student, so that was kind of my goal, was 6 years. So I should be done at the end of 2021, and 2021 will be my writing up year, which is kind of the year that you're supposed to like bring all your research together and create this splendid 100,000 word piece of research. So we'll see about that. But that's the plan, hopefully. And I can do lots of things from Edinburgh. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is incredibly frustrating to not have access to everything. There's been books I have wanted or needed that I haven't been able to access, and there's just been like bits of my research where I just had to put, we'll hopefully have access to this later. But in terms of like problems, that doesn't feel like the worst one in the world, which it isn't. So basically, I think we were actually talking about my moving before I got back onto university there. I have moved back to Edinburgh, but I have already been here for about 3 months or so, however long lockdown has been. I think we've all lost track of time a little bit. And I expect to probably be here until the end of this year, with the hopes of moving back to London in sort of December, January time. But I will update you on that in the future. And I have hired movers to bring all my stuff up. So I've never hired movers before in my entire life, but I've got a really nice moving company bringing my stuff up from London to Edinburgh, and I am so excited. I'm so excited to have all of my books in one place, because I have like another 400 books in London, and then I already have books here, and then I have my parents' books here, so you know there's a lot of books everywhere. And because of that, I kind of want to do some content around it, so I'm probably going to do a video unpacking all my books when they come back from London, and maybe like clearing them out, unhauling some of them, deciding what I'm doing with all of them, because there is also limited space. And then I also want to do an entire bookcase tour of this house. Like, I grew up in a reading household. I don't think my dad ever got rid of a single book in his entire life that he read, and he was constantly picking them up like secondhand and in library book sales, and Christmas and birthdays he got book vouchers every year, so you know he acquired quite a few. And for that reason, once I have unpacked all my books and organised them, I thought it might be nice to just sort of show you all of the bookcases in this house and a little overview. I obviously will not be pulling off every single book and sharing with you every single book on the shelves, because I mean I haven't counted, but there's a couple of thousand for sure. So it will be more of a like, these are the kinds of books that we have, and these are the genres and how they're organised and where they are, and maybe like feature a few interesting titles. So that's kind of my plan with that, and then maybe also share with you some of like my like collections. I'd quite like to do a ancient literature collection, since I'll have all of my ancient literature in the one city for the first time. I'll have like all of my books that are ancient Greek or Roman texts on one bookcase, hopefully, because I've like built a little new bookcase that I got off Argos for them all to go on, and I would quite like to share them with you. So I think you can expect in July a little bit of content themed around the fact that I have moved back to Edinburgh and all my books are here. I think that pretty much covers the move to Edinburgh update. Oh, well, people were asking me how I felt about it, and honestly, I feel fine about it. To be honest, I probably would have felt more dramatic about moving back in with my mum when I was maybe like 21, and maybe you'd think at 28 I would want to move back in with my mum even less, but actually I think I've just got a lot more perspective, and in terms of situations I am in a very, very fortunate one that I can move home and I can sort of reassess my finances and I can think about my plans in this really turbulent time. And I know a lot of my friends are sort of reassessing their situations as well, not necessarily moving back in with any of their parents, but thinking about whether they want to move cities or what they want to do for careers and things like that. Like, I think a lot of us have been faced with a lot of big decisions recently, and we're all just trying to make the best of what's going on and like our own personal circumstances. And like I said, I feel very, very fortunate in terms of my circumstances. Now, I don't know how much work I'm going to have in the next few months, but I have a home, and I have a comfortable home, and I like my mum, and we get on, and there's space here, there's space for me to do my work, and places I can go for walks to get fresh air. So I honestly am quite like content with the situation as it is. I love London and I will miss London, and I have missed London, but a lot of the reason I miss London is because of all the time and things I did with my friends that I wouldn't have been doing anyway. And I have no doubt that I will go back to London, because I do still need access to some of the things in London as they start to open back up, and next year I think I'll really want library access, so that's why I do intend to go back to London. And then I know people have asked me before like where I want to live after my PhD, and honestly I don't know. I love London though, like I am a massive London convert. I just don't know if in the long term I'd ever be able to afford to live in London as I got older, but for now I love it and I want to spend as much time as I can in it. However, I also think Edinburgh is wonderful and I feel quite content here. So that's kind of how I feel, you know? I then got a lot of questions about writing, which was really nice. Like that wasn't, I kind of expected the PhD and the Edinburgh questions, but yeah, a lot of people asked me about writing, which was super lovely. A few people asked me about my book that's coming out. So I've mentioned before that I have a children's book coming out in July, which is, what day is it? Today I'm filming this on like the 18th and it comes out on July 16th, so it's less than a month, which is so surreal to me. And I'm hoping that my copy is going to turn up soon from the publishing house, because I haven't seen it in person. I've seen all the PDFs, but I've never seen a physical copy of it, and I cannot wait to see it all printed up. But I basically did a piece of writing work last year with DK, who are a non-fiction publisher. They're owned by Penguin Random House, and they publish a lot and have done for many decades a lot of children's non-fiction. And this book that I wrote with them was like a collaborative project in the sense that they wanted somebody to write a book about Greek myths, as opposed to it being like I wrote a book of Greek myths and then pitched it. It was more of a like they were looking for somebody in that field to write the book. And it is, like I think I've already said, about Greek myths. It covers so many stories from ancient Greece, as well as giving you just some background to ancient Greek culture and like what these myths meant to them and their religion. And then it's accompanied by the most stunning illustrations by Katie Ponder, and I feel like I can say that because I didn't do them, so it's not immodest of me, but they are beautiful. That's one of the main reasons I'm super excited to have my physical copy, because this book is a work of art, genuinely. She just did the most incredible job when it came to illustrating these myths, and I love them. If you do end up with a copy, I think I can tell you that my favourite spread is the Atalanta one. I love the illustrations for Atalanta, and that was one of my personal favourite stories that I chose to include, so just a little heads up. But if you're curious, it is aimed at children about 7 to 11 years old. Obviously, I think a lot of us read kind of what we want to read and don't feel that like caged in by age ranges. I read children's books still, but if you do know any kids in the 7 to 11 year old sort of bracket, then it is particularly aimed at them. And I'm really excited to be able to see people have physical copies of it and to have my own physical copy of it, because it's very exciting. It's probably one of the most exciting things I've ever done in my life, and I'm excited to see it. Yep, articulate. The other writing project that people were asking me about is my novel, because I recently tweeted that I actually finished a first draft of a novel. Like, I think if you've ever tried to write a novel, you know how big an achievement that is. And I'm not even talking about in terms of like, it's obviously a big achievement to get published, but just finishing something is a massive accomplishment. And writing a whole story arc, and I am very proud of myself regardless of what happens in the future. But about a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was September 2018, I remember that, I started writing a new fantasy novel project. Like, I've always been writing, but I started this project. It's a fantasy novel, and I have been writing it ever since then. I've had periods where, you know, I've been like smashing it out, and other periods where I've not written anything for a couple of months. And like a week ago, I finished the first draft, and I feel a little bit sick, and it all feels a little bit surreal. I can't believe I actually did that. So really, in terms of what's next, is I do want to redraft it because I would like to try and get it published. But obviously I have no expectations at the moment. I am just going to continue working on it. I have taken the past week off, like I haven't been doing anything with it the past week because I felt like I needed a bit of space, but the more time has passed, the more I've been thinking about how I want to start redrafting it, so I think I'm going to start back on that very, very soon, and I'm just kind of like excited to make it better, because it definitely could do with a lot of redrafting. I wrote this book chronologically from beginning to end and just like bashed it out, and there are so many points in the storyline that need to be expanded and built upon, and motivations that need to be made clearer, and character development that needs to be made clearer. This is not a book that is ready for consumption by any means, although some of my very kind friends have been reading the first draft. However, maybe after some redrafting, one day it will be, and it is the first book in a series because it's a fantasy novel, and how often do you get standalone fantasies? I could not cover the whole storyline in one book. It just couldn't happen, not with all the world building and character development. And the characters are my favourite thing about this book. Like, I feel so attached to the characters that I made up, and I don't know what that says about me, but I love them so much. There is particularly 4 characters who I just feel so connected to and feels so real in my mind now. But if you're curious about what it is, it's the story of a young woman in her 20s named Adaria who lives in a university in a fantasy world when she ends up bonding with a dragon egg. Like, that is quite a popular trope. I know that that's not an incredibly original concept, the whole dragon and human bond, but it's my favourite trope in all of literature, so it's exactly what I wanted to write about. And I like to hope that in other respects the book's quite original. I feel like I have ended up sort of using it to explore a lot of contemporary political issues like capitalism and the environment and nationalism and discrimination and class politics. Like, my politics have just naturally ended up part of the storyline. It's also set in a world where there's no monarchy. The monarchy was overthrown a century previously, and we're now living in a monarchy-free fantasy world, which I feel like is rare. And there's also a queer female-female romance between the 2 of the protagonists that I love. And I love the characters so much. I know I made them up, but I love them. And I'm excited to like carry on with that project and see what comes of it in the future. I would like to redraft it, I would like to sign with an agent for it, and I would like to get it published, but I'll update you if any of that ever happens. But the third topic that I was asked many questions about was my PhD. Lots of people just asking how it's going, which is very kind of you. In the past, I have done some PhD update videos. I did one, I think, about a year in and about a halfway in. So that was maybe like 2 years, 2.5, 3 years, I don't know. But it's been a long time. I started this PhD in January of 2016. And if you're more curious about my research, I will just link those PhD videos down below because I don't want to like rehash it all again. But I am an ancient historian. I am researching sexual violence and rhetoric in the Athenian democracy of the 4th century BC. So that's where my area of interest lies, and I still love my PhD, but it's an up and down journey. I think anyone that's ever done like a massive research project like a PhD will know you connect and you disconnect over different periods of time, and particularly I think like in the aftermath of my dad passing, I really struggled with my PhD because academia was something that me and my dad shared a common interest in and that I felt close to him through and that he'd always supported me through. So I struggled in the aftermath of him passing, and there were periods where I was not like banging out the PhD, being super productive or very confident in my research. But at the moment I actually feel much more in the swing of things, and I think in large part that is thanks to therapy. I mentioned in a vlog recently that I had my final counselling session with my counsellor a few weeks ago. My final for now, you never know, you might need to go back and that's completely okay. But I started going to counselling last summer, so I've been doing it for about a year and it has been an incredible experience for me. I have learned so much about myself, my past, my behaviours, my feelings, my emotions that I don't particularly care to get into, but it has been a revolutionary experience for me, and I would highly encourage you to give it a shot if you've ever considered it or feel like it might be of benefit to you. But I think in large part thanks to the personal work I've done mentally, I have been able to sort of rediscover my love of research and really find my focus. Like, I feel like I lost my focus. It wasn't that I wasn't interested anymore or that I wasn't even continuing to do stuff, because in large part it's all very well to just work when you feel motivated, but you can't always get away with that. So sometimes I work when I don't feel motivated. I just keep doing it. It's just not with the same motivation in me, if that makes sense. Like, I always find it weird how when people ask how do you find motivation, because I feel like motivation is some like ethereal concept that we all wait for, when really you just need to get on with things, and sometimes you feel motivated and sometimes you don't, and you just have to do what you can when you can. and as much as possible. So that's kind of like, I've carried on with it, but I've not always like been 100% there with it, connected with it. And I have reconnected with it, thankfully, and I'm really, really loving it. I mean, it's a hard topic to write about in research, but I feel very invested in it and feel like it's a very important topic of research that I want to discuss and I want to open more conversations around in the study of classics. So I am doing that. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I've got about 1.5 years left. So hopefully if I just carry on with it, I will finish it, and that will all be grand. It's kind of hard to quantify, it's kind of hard to identify exactly where you are, because PhDs are quite like independent processes, and equally when you're doing it part-time you also have much more flexibility and much more time to do it within. In fact, I feel like doing a PhD part-time is so interesting because there are a lot of benefits in doing it part-time. Like, I like the flexibility. It means when my life has been unpredictable and when harder things have happened in my life, having my PhD part-time has made that easier. However, at the same time, like, it was never my plan to do it part-time. The only reason I do it part-time is because I don't have full funding. I have fees funding, which I've mentioned many times before, but don't have like a living allowance, so I need to work alongside it. So also finding that balance of working, creating, writing, researching can be difficult, and it means that like you live on quite a tight budget. You're not like sitting there on like a house deposit while studying part-time for a PhD and working at the same time. But I made my decision and I'm happy with it, and I also know that in lots of ways I'm very, very lucky. Finished my coffee, which might mean that I've probably been sitting here for far too long. But these are big topics, like how do I talk about them without going on for ages when I've spent like weeks and months of my life deliberating over them? I think that kind of covers the PhD thing. So like I don't feel in a place that I want to make PhD update videos. It's really weird because when I started doing my PhD I was so keen to do loads of regular updates on my PhD, but I feel like it's such a personal process that it feels really difficult to give advice. Like I said, there's things that have happened that aren't necessarily going to be mirrored by other PhD students' experiences that I can't give it. Like, what am I supposed to do? Here's how to do a PhD while your dad's dying. Like, I just my therapist has told me many times I laugh when I'm uncomfortable, you might be able to tell. But for that reason, I just feel like I want to be encouraging, and I want to encourage you to pursue the things you love, and there are certainly lots of great resources out there to help you with your PhD, but I don't necessarily want to talk about my personal experience now until I'm at the end. I would still recommend watching the videos I did in 1 year and halfway through, because those were kind of points at which I could really ascertain the progress I'd made, but since then there's been no like check-ins, there's been no submissions or deadlines or anything like that, and for that reason I just feel like what do I have to say? Nothing much more than I'm plodding on, to be honest, and I'm hoping to finish within the time I planned on finishing it. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. But now, before I like check out, I'm just gonna head back to Twitter and Instagram to double check what you guys actually asked me to talk about, in case there was something that I didn't address in my like 3 big topics. I don't even know how many fingers I held up there. Oh, I suppose actually some people were just asking generally how I had been and was coping with lockdown. I mean, do we even call it lockdown anymore, because everything's changing so rapidly by the day. But I think like for anybody it's been up and down. There's been days where I have been like pumped, full of adrenaline, super cheerful, super productive, loving life. There have been other days where I have just wanted to bawl my eyes out, and I have been angry at the entire world, really frustrated, worried, anxious. Like I said, my mum had an operation amidst all of this, which was obviously a little bit stressful. It's all fine now, that's been dealt with and it's all good, but you know, it's this weird combination of life carries on, because in certain respects you have to just keep doing certain things, and your health continues to sort of require your attention in the same way, but also like life is frozen. And I think we all kind of get that, and I have just like been up and down like a roller coaster. But I think that makes a lot of sense, and I'm really not that surprised. So I'm kind of just trying to go with the roller coaster, if that makes sense. Again, I also feel like I'm very lucky in that I already did a lot of my work from home, and I'm still able to do my research and my hobbies, and I'm not suddenly lost everything that filled my time beforehand. That I feel very lucky in. Obviously, it's not incredibly lucky to have lost some work. I had some work cancelled right at the beginning of lockdown, and that was really worrying. But at the moment, I just sort of like, again, like I said, I'm plodding along. I made that decision to move back to Edinburgh while I'm sort of addressing the money situation and can think more about it and sort of see what work is on the horizon, and do some of my PhD. If you'd asked me at the beginning, I probably would have been way more frantic, way more worried, but at the moment I'm just like, I feel good / comfortable with the decisions I've made, and I'm just sort of hoping to like personally just like carry on and see what happens. Like, it's so unpredictable. Like, I am worried, don't get me wrong, like I'm worried about the future of being a freelancer. I'm worried what work I'm going to get, but worrying about it doesn't really help. I am completely appalled by the behaviour of the government. I'm not that much more impressed by the government in Scotland. I don't feel very good about going places. Like, now that things are starting to open back up, like I'm not going anywhere I don't have to go. Like, I get that some people need to go places and go to shops and stuff, but like, if I don't need to go to a shop, then I am not going to one. I'm going to continue to buy my books online and from like independent bookshops that way. Like, I don't feel good about going outside. Like, I don't feel particularly relaxed about the whole pandemic situation in the slightest. And I am so grateful to those who have continued to work amidst everything on the front line throughout all of this. Like, I have friends doing that, and it's just incredible, and I think for all of their sakes in particular, we owe it to them to continue being incredibly careful. And when have I ever been impressed by the behaviour of the government, to be honest, since you guys have ever known me? Probably never. Oh, there were some more questions about sort of the general process of writing that novel. That maybe deserves its own video. Maybe I will do a video about the redrafting process as I'm in it and talk more about the initial writing process, if that's of interest. Let me know, because I know I'm not like a published fiction author who can provide you loads of insight into somebody who has that experience, but just from the perspective of somebody who likes to write and who has finished a project, let me know if you'd like to know about that. Other than that, I think I've been sitting here for about 45 minutes filming this video, so I'm a little bit terrified of editing it right now and how short I'm actually going to manage to make it. But maybe you've sat here with your own coffee or tea and just like relaxed and most likely just like zoned out everything I've said, which is completely fine. But if you are curious, I guess you know now. Yeah, I think that covers everything. I mean, it always feels like there's more to chat about, so like if you've got more questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try and answer them there, and we can just generally talk more. Have you been writing anything? Have you been studying anything? Have you been working on a project? How have you been generally finding lockdown? Have you got any small joys to share? Just like, let's chat in the comments. That would be lovely. And until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys.